In my last video, I introduced Marxist criticism and provided a few tips on how to use it effectively. In this video, we're going to see these ideas and tips in action by applying them to a text, Shakespeare's King Lear. But if you haven't seen the previous video, I'd recommend that you do that first. I'll link it down in the description. Now, before we dive into King Lear, we need to cover a crucial Marxist concept called modes of production. When Marx and Engels stepped back and took a look at human history, they saw a sequence of different modes of production. This is the name that is given to the way in which society is organised to produce goods and services. Before the birth of agriculture, for example, humans were hunter-gatherers who sourced their food, as well as other goods that they needed to survive, such as tools, from nature. They would then distribute these goods among their tribe. For this reason, Marx and Engels referred to this mode of production as primitive communism, since the tribe was not divided into different classes, and goods were distributed equally among its members. In this way, Marx and Engels scrutinized different periods of history and identified the way in which society was designed to produce and share material goods. The mode of production that structured society in medieval Europe, for example, was feudalism. This system divided society up into 4 different categories: the king, the lords, the knights, and the peasants. These 4 different categories of people were ordered into a hierarchy, with the king at the top and the peasants at the bottom, as you can see in this diagram. In order to receive the goods and services that they needed to survive, each category would serve the category above them on the hierarchy. The peasants farmed the land of the knights, and in return they received protection. The knights defended and fought for the lords, and in return they were given some land. And finally the lords supplied the king with soldiers and horses for his army, and in return they were also given land. So as you can see, feudalism is founded on a series of mutually beneficial relationships, and this is the mode of production that dominated and structured society in medieval Europe. Eventually, feudalism was replaced by a new mode of production, called capitalism. Under capitalism, the means of production, so that's factories, farms, plantations, mines, offices, etc., are privately owned by individuals and businesses. According to this system, workers are paid a wage for their service, rather than receiving land, goods, or another service in return. So, what does any of this have to do with King Lear? Well, the world that Shakespeare lived in, which is the Jacobean Elizabethan era, had moved out of medieval feudalism. However, the change was still quite new, and capitalism was still in its infancy. Consequently, many Marxist interpretations of Shakespeare view his work as belonging to an age which was still experiencing the aftershocks of tumultuous socio-economic change. As Lucy Webster puts it, this is a society in the process of change, torn between past and present. Consequently, some Marxist critics view Shakespeare's works as a reaction to the emergence of capitalism. These readings often detect anxieties or concerns about the new attitude towards work, money, and profits that had arisen in Shakespeare's day. They draw out a fear of the future and the unknown. They sometimes reflect on instances in Shakespeare's plays which seem to express apprehension about the increasing commodification of life or a concern about materialism. With this in mind, let's turn our attention towards King Lear. Can you think of any dramatic instances or themes in the play which examine the dangers of valuing people and relationships in economic or material terms? A good place to start might be to think of the characters' names, as so many of the characters in this play are represented by pieces of land: Kent, Gloucester, Cornwall, Albany, and France. This perhaps creates the impression that the value of a human being is determined by their property and possessions. They are named after and therefore represented by that which they own. This idea is reinforced by Lear's request that his daughters profess their love for him in return for their inheritance. Although Lear claims that he already divided his kingdom prior to his daughters' professions of love, he says, "Know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom." The fact that Cordelia is denied her portion because she fails to profess her feelings ardently enough confirms that their speeches have a direct bearing on the quantity of land that they receive. In doing so, Lear attaches an economic value to love, which reveals that he is perceiving, understanding, and judging his feelings towards his daughters in commercial or numerical terms. George Held argues that Lear's love test is based on the assumption that a person's words accurately reflect the extent of his love, and that he can thus distinguish the quantity of each of his daughters' love for him merely on the basis of words. The key word here is quantity. Lear believes that love can be quantified, and in doing so, he commodifies people, relationships, and feelings. Notice the way in which the language of commerce pervades this crucial scene in the play. Even Cordelia uses it, as she claims that, when she's married, her husband will receive half my love, half my care and duty. The tragedy of King Lear lies in this propensity for determining the value of relationships between people in numerical terms, and attaching an economic value, in terms of land, to professions of love. As a result of Lear's decision to divide his kingdom in this way, and consequently cast Cordelia aside, every form of social bond in the play breaks down. The parent-child relationship is destroyed, as Goneril, Regan, and Edmund all refuse to treat a parent with respect and compassion, and instead prosper from their suffering. The sense of obligation between guests and their hosts disintegrates, as Gloucester is blinded in his own home. And finally, the bond between servants and their masters is broken when Lear dismisses Kent from his service for giving honest advice. What do you think? Could this be a representation of the transition from feudalism to capitalism? Remember that feudalism is a system which is founded on social obligations between people. One set of people helps another set of people in return for something. It's a system based on the principle of mutual support for mutual reward. Capitalism, meanwhile, prioritizes profit, and perhaps commodifies people by viewing them through the lens of the profit that they can produce. So, when Lear adopts a capitalist mindset by quantifying the love that his daughters express for him, and every social bond in the play collapses as a result, Shakespeare is perhaps reflecting on the replacement of feudalism by capitalism. In other words, King Lear could be regarded as an expression of Shakespeare's concern about the impact that the new ideas and attitudes that accompanied the emergence of capitalism will have on relationships between people. Of course, this is only one Marxist interpretation of the play. There are no correct answers, and you're completely free to agree or disagree with it as you decide, though be sure to always support your opinions with evidence from the play. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel whilst also gaining access to a whole bundle of extra content, please go and check out my Patreon page. I've linked it down in the description. For just £5 a month, you could get all of these grade-boosting goodies, and on top of that, all my patrons receive personal feedback from me on a piece of written work per month. So again, go to the link in the description if that's of interest to you. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.